Hi, I'm Deboki, and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I'm going to be talking about 3 new-to-me romance writers that I tried out in February. This is part of my ongoing attempt to move away from doing monthly wrap-ups and instead kind of do monthly recaps, where I'm not going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the previous month, but I'm going to instead kind of like pick and choose a few themes or whatever that kind of like best suits, talking about what my reading was like in the previous month. And obviously, February is ripe for discussions about romance novels. And I think I've definitely noticed over the past few years, I feel like in a lot of, even in like non-bookish places and non-romance book oriented places, like the discourse around romance novels has gotten a lot better. It's moved away from very like trite and stereotypical images of what people think romance is, and instead is kind of like moving towards a better understanding of just like how diverse this category of books is. And I'm really excited for that. I'm excited for people who are new to romance. I'm excited for people who are getting back into romance. I'm excited for everyone who is kind of finding their own little pockets of romance that work for them, or also, the parts that don't. I know that romance is not for everyone, but I am excited for people for whom it can be a fun category of books. I'm excited for them to find the guides on the internet, to find the people on the internet, to find their own little community or whatever it is that they need to get into the genre. But of course, romance is also very, very big, and even as someone who has been reading romance for more than a decade, I am definitely realizing how limited my own reading of romance is. There are so many corners that I have not even remotely peeked at, and so I'm really kind of trying to branch out and to find other parts of the romance world that I haven't ventured as much into, or to even revisit parts of romance that maybe I used to read and just hadn't read as much recently. And weirdly, and I'm not really sure what's going on with this, I hope it does not point to anything inside of me that I need to address, but the adjective that I would use to describe some of my romance reading lately, and I don't know why, it's not something that I feel has really described my romance reading in a while, maybe ever, but the adjective that I would use is militaristic. I've talked in some recent videos about trying some of the books in Milla Vane's A Gathering of Dragons series, which is a barbarian romance series, so there's plenty of blood and bloodshed and battles and whatnot along with the romance. And then even outside of romance, I have been reading more fantasy, and I think not always, but I feel there's a lot of fantasy stories that do kind of tread in militaristic battle-y kind of waters. There is always some kind of well, not always, but there is often a kind of climactic battle involved in a lot of fantasy. So I don't know, that's a thing that I've noticed happening more in my reading lately. That militaristic-y kind of thing is kind of going to be a recurring theme in some of the books I'm going to be talking about today, as is the fact that these are all books that are part of an ongoing series where the series follows one couple. A lot of times in romance series, you'll get something like the Bridgerton series where one book will focus on one couple and then, the next book will focus on another couple. And you might get glimpses of the previous couple and whatnot, but each book is really focused on one pair. These series are different in that they're one pairing that makes up the bulk of a group of books in the series. Not always, I think at some point in some of these series you're going to move on to another couple, but you really get multiple books centered around one pair of characters. I've talked recently about enjoying romance novels where you can follow a couple over a longer period of time, so it's not just the initial push and pull of how they meet or how they kind of set up the first few stages of their relationship, but really getting to see them grow over a long period of time. And there are some individual romance novels that can do that, but I think it's much easier to accomplish over multiple books because you got more pages, and you can set up different arcs across different books and stuff like that. So again, today I'm going to be talking about 3 new-to-me romance authors. Some of them have been writing for a while, some of them are newer. I'm excited to talk about all of them, even if I had a range of experiences. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is The Queen's Gambit, which is the first book in the Rogue Queen series by Jessie Mihalik. This series is a space opera series featuring our heroine Samara. She is the queen of a rogue coalition called the Rogue Coalition, and they are a rogue coalition because they are neither part of the Quint Confederacy or the Kos Empire. Don't know if it's KOS, I don't know, KOS. These are the 2 big space empires that are battling each other for control of space or something. As queen, Samara needs to make sure that her people are fed. They've been starving, they're a rogue coalition. They don't have allies in these big empires. So when Valentin Kos, the emperor of the Kos Empire, gets kidnapped by the Quint Confederacy, she sees this as her opportunity to make some big bucks. So she goes in and she's I'm gonna rescue him, but then I'm going to hold him hostage so that, his people have to pay her some ransom and she can feed her people. But of course, this rescue plan does not go as smoothly as she had originally originally intended for it to go. And so she and this emperor guy, they end up having to work together. And as they work together, they develop mutual respect, mutual lust, all of that good stuff. I haven't read a lot of space operas, and I'm like a little bit worried that I'm using the phrase space opera and maybe I'm not using it technically correctly. Maybe I should just call it vaguely sci-fi, but I think of this as very much like in line with what I think of like a Star Wars thing as. And I have enjoyed a few of the Star Wars movies. I liked the spacey, battle-y element, and so that was something that I was drawn to with the series. Unfortunately, I ended up pretty underwhelmed by Queen's Gambit. There were two main things that I was really hoping for out of the story. One, very obviously, I wanted a good romance. That's what I go to romance for. And then two, I was really hoping for a good political story. You know, you've got these like different coalitions, you've got political battles going on, you've got like people like having to navigate being leaders and kidnappings and whatnot. Like I had kind of went in with the hope that this would combine what I look for in a good political story with that romance element, you know, alongside all of that other action. As far as the romance goes, the one thing I will say is that this is clearly going to be a slow burn series. This is not a book where you're going to get to the end and feel even sort of like a happily for now. I can tolerate that. I can work with that. I like authors that can build that anticipation where, you know, you are at the end of the book and you are waiting for the next book and you're just like on edge because you're like, okay, like I really want to know what's going to happen to these characters. I want to know what's going to happen to them individually. I want to know what's going to happen to them together. Like I appreciate that when an author can do that really well. But for me with this book, there just wasn't that much chemistry to get invested in. Valentin Coase, he starts out the book as kind of like just a blank slate of a hot guy, and by the end he's just kind of slightly less blank slatey of a hot guy. Like there's just not that much more that I know about him that makes me feel like, yes, I want to know more. And then Samara will like have these moments where she's like, you know, a little bit distracted by how hot he is, and like I guess like fair, like I guess that's distracting, but that's not enough for me to be like, yes, they must get together. And so the romance felt very underbaked, and then the politics of this book also felt very underbaked. And most of our time in this book is spent navigating Samara's world, but I don't think we really got much further or learned much more than just like rogue coalition. Like that's just kind of the extent to which that world felt defined to me. Samara's capacity as a leader seems to just be that like people want her to be a leader, and like that's kind of the extent to it. And then she just goes around telling people like to not do a harmful thing, and they're just like, okay. And like, okay, I don't know, maybe she is an incredible leader because somehow in her incredibly impoverished coalition, there is no political discord. Like no one is like, hey, is this impoverishment a function of our leader? Which is a thing that often happens in an impoverished situation. Like that is a thing that you see happen all the time in the world. And so like the fact that like she is somehow leading this coalition that is like starving and no one is like trying to like depose her, like everyone still loves her, like all that stuff, like regardless of whether or not it is or isn't her fault, like all of that just like doesn't ring true to how like politics, at least as I've seen it, actually works. And there's a point at which like she is like teaching Valentin how to be a leader, and her lesson seems to just boil down to like, just listen to people and everything will work. And again, like that is cute, like that is sweet. I like that idea for like how politics should work, and I absolutely think that there's a problem in politics where people don't listen to their constituents, but that is not the entirety of politics. That is not something that fixes politics, because politics, like discord, all of that stuff is built on conflicts, not just of like listening to people, but of like how people's values conflict and contradict with each other. You know, it's not just solved by listening. There are a lot of pieces to that. And so the fact that this rogue coalition did not seem to have that much complexity in all of these regards just kind of made Samara's own accomplishments fall really flat. So with that said, I don't think I'm going to finish this series. I'm not really invested in these characters or their politics or their world to like really see where it goes. At the same time, there were a lot of elements to Mihalek's writing that I feel like is promising, where like I could see, like I think this is one of her earlier series and she has a more recent series that's come out. And I'm curious to see if like that series does a better job on building the world and the characters and the romance. So I think I will give her other books a try at some point, but I will probably not be continuing or finishing this series anytime soon. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Burn For Me, which is the first book in the Hidden Legacy series by Alana Andrews. I haven't read any Alana Andrews books, which is both kind of surprising and unsurprising to me. I used to read a lot of like urban fantasy, paranormal-y kind of romance books when I first started getting into romance, which is a long time ago, like way back in college. And I kind of feel like, you know, in that time, I probably should have read an Alana Andrews book, but I didn't. So here I am now, many years later, finally trying out an Alana Andrews book. I think they're best known for their Kate Daniels series, and for some reason, I just decided to try out this Hidden Legacy series instead. Burn for Me and the Hidden Legacy series is set in this kind of like alternate version of our world where there's magic, but like magic is also this very hierarchical thing. Like there are definitely people who are better at it than others. There are different types of magic, and over time, like just like wealth, that power has accumulated in certain families, and they are now like the top families. There are these like basically billionaire, powerful, super magical families that are called like Prime. The heroine of Burn for Me is Nevada Baylor. She is a private detective. She gets called in to track down a Prime who is super strong. He can set fires with his magic, and he's wreaking a lot of havoc. So she gets called in to find him, and then along the way she ends up having to work with this other Prime named Connor Mad Rogan, who is super strong and also super into her. And so together they have to contend with this mystery, they have to contend with a lot of magic, and they have to contend with the fact that this guy really wants to have sex with her. And man, this was a weird book for me to like read now, because I think this is a book that when I was in that earlier stage of like really reading a lot of paranormal romances, that I probably would have like loved a lot more, but that also like now, more than a decade into like my romance reading journey, like I'm just not a huge fan of like this kind of style of paranormal romance where like a lot of it hinges around a very powerful magic dude who's also kind of a raging, egomaniacal, violent asshole. Mad Rogan's introduction into Nevada's life is pretty violent, and she is very clear about like what she'll tolerate and not tolerate in his bullshit. So I very much appreciated that about her character and about the book overall, that it's not like glorifying him being this kind of violent asshole. But this is clearly another kind of slow burn series, and I think like the romance that we're seeing kind of introduced in this first book, I think in the series overall is going to be built, you know, not just on Nevada and Mad Rogan like getting into each other, but also on him, again, learning to be less of an egomaniacal, violent, raging asshole. And like, I guess, but like I am personally just not invested in that journey much anymore. It takes a lot for me to care about that kind of journey at this point, and this book didn't do it for me. And on top of all of this violence that I guess we're gonna have to unpack for him over the course of the series, having him publicly and magically grope a woman to orgasm in the Houston Galleria did not make him any more interesting to me. I do kind of respect this book overall because I think it does a lot with its magic, with its world, to actually like craft a very compelling system that like clearly has some issues, and like that this series is going to explore. The magical hierarchy underlying this world is clearly pretty bleak and like weird, but it makes sense in the context of the story as it's laid out. And beyond that background world building, the book also did a really good job of making me very invested in Nevada and her family. They're very tight-knit, but there's complicated family history because, you know, they're a family. And she's also got this incredible mechanic grandmother who is like very good at building things and is also just like a fucking delight. So because of that, because of the family stuff, there's a part of me that wants to keep reading the series. Like there is a part of me that wants to continue, and I'm a little bit torn. I finished this book and then immediately bought the next book on my Kindle, and then like immediately after buying it, regretted it because I'm like, I don't know if I actually want to read the next book or not. Like I don't think I do, but there's a part of me that wants to know what's going to happen to her family. Like there's definitely a greater chance that I am going to continue with this series than I was with the Rogue Queen series, but it's still, I think, kind of a slim probability. So moving on to the last series. The last series I'm going to be talking about today is the Big Bad Wolf series by Charlie Adhara. The series starts with Cooper Dayton, who is ex-FBI, but he now works for what's called the Bureau of Special Investigations. What makes their investigation special? It's because they all involve werewolves. The thing is that like this is the world we live in, but there are werewolves, and the werewolves have made themselves apparent to the government. They are not making themselves apparent to the public, but they have realized that they have now reached a point in civilization where they cannot keep their existence hidden, so they've told the government, like, hey, we're here. And so now there is a Bureau of Special Investigations to handle crimes that involve werewolves, and Dayton himself has come off of being attacked by a werewolf, which is how he got inducted into this thing. In the first book, The Wolf at the Door, Dayton gets sent to Maine to basically figure out whether or not a series of deaths that seem to be be related to werewolves are actually related to werewolves. And while he is there, he is expected to work with this agent from the Trust, which is a werewolf policing-ish kind of organization, sort of. And this agent is named Park, and of course they have to work together to solve this mystery. Dayton has to figure out if he's going to trust this werewolf guy or not, and then of course also eventually he's going to have to figure out like whether or not he should be hooking up with this other werewolf guy or not. So look, the last two books, I only talked about one book in those series. And that was for a reason. It was because that was the only book that I decided to read in those series. With this, we're going to talk about the whole damn series because I loved it so much. I basically inhaled them over the course of a week. And I didn't really expect to get into the series. Werewolves are not like, I don't know, like a paranormal romance trope or whatever that I ever get particularly excited about. And like from my time in fandom, I've run into a handful of stories that are like a little bit too excited about the wolf element to it, you know? And like that is obviously not what werewolf stories are always in general, but just like the handful like that I have come across were enough to make me a little bit like, I don't know that I want to read werewolf stories, right? So like it was sort of like a proceed with caution scenario with me with the first book. The reason why I decided to give this book a shot is because it came from Carina Press, which is a publisher that I've noticed has been publishing a lot of books that I really enjoy, and it was also edited by Mackenzie Walton, who is an editor, again, who has edited books that I find that I keep enjoying. So I was like, you know, that combo seems to be a good combo for me. I'm gonna give this series a shot. And again, like I said, I inhaled this series, and I think there's two big things kind of underlying why I just got so into it. The first one is just Cooper Dayton, our main character. The series is told entirely through his point of view, and he is just like, he is an asshole, but he's an asshole in a way that like I personally relate to deeply, where like he is both kind of very open in some ways, but he's also like very distrusting of people, but like in a way that he is insecure about. Like he doesn't quite know who it is he trusts, who it is he doesn't trust, but like that is part of like what makes him so distrustful. It's like that anxiety about not understanding how to process other people. And I relate to that. And he's constantly bouncing back and forth between that openness and that distrustingness in a way that is like, you know, disorienting for him. It's disorienting for the people around him. And it's very disorienting for the people, especially that he's close to. And a thing that I often get mad at in romances are conflicts that boil down to, you know, the use your words kind of fights where like all you need to do is communicate. However, at the same time, I also recognize that a very realistic part of life as a human is that sometimes we are bad at communication, that we are not all perfectly equipped with the ability to use our words correctly at all times, and that sometimes people, you know, they keep things to themselves not because they are trying to further conflict to create dramatic tension in the narrative of their life, but because there is something legitimately inside of them that is keeping them from communicating in some way. And so this is a book that I think manages to use that kind of communication conflict in a way that better reflects the internal machinations of the characters and like kind of what they're actually going through, rather than just like trying to create drama for the sake of drama, and in a way that I think like builds Dayton and also Park's characters in like a way that makes their relationship very realistic. It leans into those conflicts so that it actually means something in the context of the characters rather than just like as a plot device to stir up drama. This is a thing that comes up for Dayton, and it also comes up for Park as well because he is the werewolf in this story. He's got like werewolf baggage, and some of it is baggage that like we're not finding out until later books in the series, and that you know early on there is something there, but because of secrets that he's keeping for whatever reasons, like we know that it's coming, and it's frustrating because you want him to just like lay it all out there in the open, but also like it makes sense over the course of the series. You understand why these things are things that he's keeping close to the vest and not just like fully laying out there for Dayton to know. And I think that builds to my second point, which is that this is a series that uses a lot of like different tropes and kind of pseudo tropes or whatever, like little elements that you'll find in romance novels a lot of time, or romantic plots a lot of the time. And there are elements that I often don't like, but that get used in this book in a way that actually feels like, I don't know, I don't want to say fresh because there are things that come up a lot, but it feels like it really suits the story and it really suits the characters, so that you don't actually feel like you're just like rehashing the same trope for the umpteenth time. It actually kind of helped me understand why sometimes those tropes are ones that I don't like in other stories. Like, you know, there's like an ex who comes in, and usually you're kind of like, oh shit, this ex is going to stir this kind of potential conflict up, but it's actually like, that is not what the role of the ex in the story is. And like, while there's still like other elements there going on where like they are very much an ex, it felt more like, I don't know, like actually watching like grown adults deal with things in a grown adult kind of way. And okay, so I said there were two things that I loved about this series. There is also definitely a third. There's probably a lot more, but we're gonna stop at 3. I also really just loved Dayton and Park's relationship and how it is built over the series, how it's explored. These are characters in their 30s and it shows. I am at a point in my life where, yes, I love a good romance. I love like seeing characters chase each other and whatnot, but also I kind of want to watch characters be boring together. Like that is a thing that is very romantic to me. I have like my dream is to one day read a scene of characters doing their taxes together. And like obviously this is a series about werewolf detectives. So there is plenty of excitement. There's plenty of time for non-boring shit. But there's also a scene where our werewolf detectives go house hunting and they have to argue about like a fireplace. And I was like, yes, that is so sweet. Hopefully, I don't know when the next book's coming out. I don't know when it's set. Maybe it's set in March and April. Maybe we're gonna get them doing their taxes together. Maybe we're gonna learn how werewolves do their taxes, and I will get that romance scene that I have been dreaming of now for like, not that long, but long enough. The way that the last book ended, I think that there are more books coming out in the series, so I'm very excited. There are some plot points which like I'm a little bit nervous about, but again, like every time I've gotten nervous about an upcoming plot point, the series has managed to surprise me and turn it into something that I am very compelled by, that I am very intrigued about and very curious about. I hope the rest of the series goes as well as the beginning has gone because I have been truly loving it. So those are the romance authors that I tried out in February. If you have suggestions for other authors, like kind of like along these lines, let me know. Also, if you have found a new favorite romance author recently, let me know down below. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Bye.